We're in Matthew chapter 8, and in this, what we have as a chapter, but this, um, I guess in a way it would be a chapter to the story of Jesus. He is in Capernaum, and in verse 14, well, he just finished healing the centurion's servant with the word, and then in verse 14, when Jesus came to Peter's house, okay, uh, Peter had a house in Capernaum. And when you realize that it's right on the Sea of Galilee, it makes sense. I mean, that's how he made his living. When Jesus came into Peter's house, he saw Peter's mother-in-law lying in bed with a fever. For us, fever is concerning. But before aspirin, people died because of a fever. It was very serious. Well, somehow Jesus just knew or had been told. I don't care. But in verse 15, he touched her hand and the fever left her, and she got up and began to wait on him. I don't know how long she'd had a fever. We're not given that information. But it had sent her to bed. When she was healed, there wasn't this period of convalescence. I mean, she popped out of bed and started serving, waiting on him. Well, of course, if you had thought, and by the way, it was not an empty thought, if you had seen others with a fever die because where there's a fever, they wouldn't have known to call it an infection, but we know that. Wouldn't you be a little bit grateful if, in this case, Jesus touched her hand and boom, diada, no more fever. She could feel it. And her strength, whatever strength had been drained by the fever, evidently was restored, or she pushed through it. It's just like, I think, and I'm not accusing you, but I lose the wonder of Jesus because I've read it so often. I've heard the stories. I've even preached the stories of his miracles. That's not a smart thing to do. Okay. But Matthew goes on, when evening came, many who were demon-possessed were brought to him, and he drove out the spirits with the word and healed all the sick. It's not like some got it and some didn't. No. You come to Jesus, he heals you. I'm convinced that some of the things that we attribute to a variety of disorders could be the result of the activity of demons. I'm not sure how far to push that, though. For me, I don't push it too far. But I will say the demons were incredibly active in Jesus' day. Well, think about why would that be? Well, I think our enemy, the devil, understood this. I don't know whether he knew it was going to be 3 years. I don't think he did. But he knew right now Jesus was here, and that was a very huge obstacle to the devil's agenda. And so, of course, it was a spiritual battle. And he threw all of his assets into it. I don't know. I don't want to push that too far either. Although I do think he still is in the business of messing with, harming people through demons. And there's a whole big field of study called demonology, where you look at the instances in the Old and New Testaments of demonic activity, and then on the basis of that, these theologians, some are scholars, some are not, draw conclusions about the activity of demons. I'm not qualified for that. If you want more information, you got a computer. If you're watching this, look it up. Okay. It's interesting how often Matthew writes about how Jesus fulfilled prophecy. And in verse 17, all these healings and the driving out of demons, this was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. He took up our infirmities and carried our diseases. Okay. And Matthew goes on. This is verse 18 for us. When Jesus saw the crowd around him, he gave orders to cross to the other side of the lake. And I don't know which side it is. But they left Capernaum and went. I mean, you had basically 3 directions you could go to get to another side of the lake. And evidently, when he got there, in verse 19, a teacher of the law came to him and said, "Teacher, I'll follow you wherever you go." This is interesting. This teacher is unnamed. He's only identified as a teacher of the law. In Hebrew culture, a teacher of the law was generally highly regarded and respected, unless he was a lousy teacher of the law. We don't even know that about this guy. We just know that he was a teacher of the law. I think I kind of have an element of respect for him. He would have been swimming upstream when he said, I'll follow you wherever you go. You ever been to church camp? Sorry, a little bunny trail here. Church camp is a fantastic experience for kids and for adults who go as sponsors. A huge percentage of men and women who are in full-time located ministry, where that's how they derive their income, they made that decision at church camp. And there's a lot of us who at church camp were filled with enthusiasm and affection and love and passion, and sat around the campfire. I'll go wherever God sends me. I am his guy. Now, I only went to church camp about 17 years as a youth minister, and can't even count them as a kid. And so I know this firsthand from my own life even. But there are a lot of kids that come home from church camp totally fired up. And 3 to 6 weeks later, life has become like normal. And the fire becomes embers, and then coals, and then cold. Happens. I don't want to say that's what happened to this teacher of the law. But let's go on. And Jesus replied to him, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." That identifier, the Son of Man, he uses that a lot to refer to himself. And it's not like Jesus said, "No, you're not ready," or you don't really mean that. It's just that if you're going to follow Jesus, there will be obstacles and challenges and difficulties. I mean, like, the Son of Man has no place to lay his head, meaning I don't own a house, I don't have a travel trailer, I sleep outside, I stay with friends. Are you ready for that? To this teacher of the law. And we don't even know what the teacher of the law's response was. In verse 21, another disciple said to him, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." And that seems like a legitimate request, especially in Hebrew culture. One of the 10 commandments is honor your father and mother. And in the Hebrew culture, arranging for and taking care of the burial of your parent was one of the things at the top of the list of honoring mom and dad. And I don't think Jesus saw anything wrong with that. But listen to what he said, "Follow me and let the dead bury their own dead." Wait. I mean, that seems, to me, that just seems, I mean, really? I mean, this guy, he wants to follow you, but he's got this obligation at home. Okay. Many possibilities here. One possibility is that Jesus was saying, family of origin doesn't matter anymore. If you're going to follow me, it's just, Could be. Another interpretation would be that this guy's dad was he wasn't anywhere near death. And what he was saying is, I'm going to I'll follow you, but I got to put it off. Well, Jesus said, no. If you're going to follow me, then you let the dead bury the dead. I don't know exactly how to interpret this other than when you decide to follow Jesus, this becomes your number one highest priority, and you organize your life around that commitment and priority. And in order to do that, everything else has to fall below that commitment, or else what will happen, and this happens with me all the time, and I'm pretty sure it happens with most people, is we have our life and we got all these things, and we try to put our priority in wherever we can. And I think Jesus is saying that won't work. It's going to cost you. If you're going to follow me in that moment, he didn't have a place to stay, you probably won't either. And you know what? following him has to be our prime directive, and everything else has to come under that. Now that's easy to preach and teach, right? That's hard to do. So I'm going to just leave you with that. I've gone over time anyway. I'll see you next time on Soul Care with Stevie.